Good friends, good books, and a sleepy conscience. This is the ideal life. Mark Twain. You're listening to AMI Audiobook Review on AMI Audio. I'm your host, Jacob Shamansky, with AMI's Ram Yamathan. Rams, what do you think he means by a sleepy conscience?
Isn't it just kind of like saying you don't really have to be there?
Not looking too deeply into things.
Yeah.
When questionable things are brought up, you just sort of let them slip away in the way that
Just
when
let
you're
them
with
be.
good friends, you say some pretty questionable things, and
Yeah.
it kind of slides in the way that when you're in a more refined company, you don't let that type of thing slide exactly.
Long story long. Exactly.
Yep.
Also, it's kind of like saying you don't have to be on the defense all the time.
Yes,
You don't have
yeah,
to
exactly.
justify or provoke or feel like you're being attacked. You're just kind of
You're more
whatever.
open and you have your guard down. And so
Guard down. That's
when
it.
you have a sleepy conscience, like, isn't that the mark of friendship when you don't have to have your guard up all the time?
It's a mark of a good day.
Honestly.
Stress-free, relaxed, or just not a care in the world, just being yourself.
Well, I hope somebody
Starting to sound like an all-inclusive vacation.
Yeah, for social interactions. Well, somebody that I hope has a sleepy conscience right now is Danielle McLaughlin, who's our new regular contributor. Danielle, we've had you on the show before. You're a familiar voice to the channel, but you're officially part of AMI Audiobook Review, and we're so happy to have you.
I am completely thrilled to be here, Jacob and Ramya. It's a delight to be back on AMI. I've missed my AMI friends.
I know.
Oh,
I hope many people are going, "Oh, Danielle, it's nice to hear your voice again. You've been all over the network with us, and you still follow. It's so nice. Thank you."
Thank you.
Danielle, do you have a LinkedIn profile-esque introduction for yourself? Do you have an elevator pitch?
Elevator pitch.
Elevator pitch. Well, I'm not on LinkedIn because, I'm a retired person, and I think that on the whole, LinkedIn is for people who are, in an employed situation. At least that's my usual thought about it. I retired in 2016 as the Director of Education for the Canadian Civil Liberties Association and Education Trust. I almost immediately was invited to join Kelly and Company, as it was then, as a Know Your Rights contributor, which was one of the great passions of my life, and I had so much fun. And then followed Kelly and Ramya to the TV, to the cable channel, and then I have been invited to join you guys, and I am very pleased to be connected still with AMI. In my spare time, I write kids' books, and I've published
Oh.
two. One about to be published, but we'll talk about that in a bit, right?
Big secrets.
Big secrets. Yep. And I am a frantic swimmer. I love to swim. It's my favorite thing to do. If I can't swim, I'm frantic. My conscience will not rest.
That's amazing. I know we're going to talk about swimming in a book context as well. Not
For
today,
sure.
but
Yes. No,
teaser for future.
I do have a collection of books about swimming that I would love to talk about.
It's so specific, and we
It is.
will get to get a picture of your tastes in books because we'll get to rapid fire review in just a minute. But first, I wanted to ask you, what books do you loathe reading? Because you can ask somebody what's their favorite genres, but I feel it's almost more telling when you ask them, what do you hate reading? What do you hate listening to? Well,
Or narrating.
Yeah, exactly. Or narrating. Yeah, exactly.
Yes, exactly. Because an aside, I do record for PAL reading, and I've a lot of books I wouldn't otherwise have read. I've read for PAL, some of which I have loved. One I'm working on right now, which I've loved, and some that have been so terrible that it's caused me physical pain. I really. I go for a well-written book, and I'm in almost any area. I am happy if the book is well written. If it isn't, I just don't have. I keep thinking, wait a minute, how much longer am I going to live? Can I actually bother to finish this book? Surely there's something out there that would be better for me to be reading right now. And yeah, I have really no patience for poorly written work. And there's a lot out there, I've got to tell you. Lazy writers, who will decide, or writers who have no idea that the book needs to be edited and have gone on for several hundred extra pages when somebody should have said, okay, let me take this manuscript away from you now. Those are the things that I find very tiresome.
This is a hot take if I've ever heard one. How much longer do I have to live?
Yeah.
What's the question? Okay, well, do you man, I don't want to go too deep into that rabbit hole because I feel like it's its own conversation around that. But what do you love to read then? When you think well written, do you think of any particular authors or sequences or
Yeah.
what literature is, what it used to be?
Yeah, well, I maintain great hope that every year will bring forward new and wonderful writers.
Hmm.
I have many favorites from long, long ago, and current favorites. I have a bit of a passion for Irish women writers. There are coming from Ireland and currently living in Ireland some absolutely brilliant writers. I mean, Irish writing goes back many, many generations. And I think I was awakened by James Joyce as a teenager and couldn't believe what I was reading. It was so wonderful. But there's a writer called Anne Enright whose works I have loved and
Mhm.
am always hopeful. She is, I believe, the first writer who is designated as the prose laureate. Now, many countries have poet laureates, but Ireland was the first, I believe, to have a prose laureate, and Anne
Oh.
Enright was the first prose laureate, and deservedly so. So,
Impressive.
that I find very impressive. And I like writers who don't take themselves terribly seriously. You can get into a lot of doom and gloom, and sometimes it's nice when somebody takes a very serious situation and shows you why it's also funny.
Right.
That's that's a real treat for me.
Yeah, I think that aspect of not taking yourself too seriously is one of the great things of Stephen King. Is he's a
Mm.
great writer, but he's very humble and just enjoys storytelling on
Hmm.
on a simple level. You don't need to go too deep into it or make some sort of great grand points about the human condition. Sometimes it's not that deep.
Yeah.
Or sometimes it is deep, but you wanna be pulled back to the surface, right?
Yes,
Like,
exactly.
it's true, it is an art. Um, Danielle, you mentioned that you narrate for PAL. How many hours a week do you do that? And
Um,
does it change or impact your audiobook listening?
Good question. I tend to read printed books because I am fortunate enough to be able to do that. Um, I have listened to some books. Find that I most likely listen to books on car trips, so that
Mhm.
we will get say discs from the library or audiobooks. My granddaughter listens to all sorts of podcasts and audiobooks, and she was really puzzled because I walk rather a lot. I try to get in around 5 kilometers a day, but I prefer not to listen to anything for several reasons. One is safety. I'm afraid I'll be
Mm.
listening so intently I'll walk out in front of traffic. And the other is I like to be with my thoughts and hear what's going on around me. So I tend more to read books in print, but mindful of that, I many of my friends do. You know, use audiobooks a lot. And I really love the idea that I can contribute to that by recording for PAL. I record about 2 to 2.5 hours a week. And every now and then I get so engaged with a book, I forget to stop after that period of time. And every now and then there's a book that's so painful that I wanna stop desperately at
That
it
you've handed it
before I
to
get
somebody
my
else?
yeah, before I have done that recently. I won't mention the book or the client, but, if anyone's listening, they know who they are and what the book is. But, it was just a really poorly written, piece of work where the author had never found a subjunctive clause he didn't like and would tack them on to sentence after sentence, and they just you couldn't breathe while you were reading this particular book. So Yes, that's enough said about that.
I
Okay.
like how you hide the identity of the client as well, as
Yeah.
if it
We
reflects on
won't play
them
21
too. Yeah.
questions.
No, lovely
Find out here.
client, but yeah,
Have they, yes or no, have they responded to a book club question?
I don't, you know
In
what?
my audiobook
I
review.
hope so. I really hope so.
Good client, bad taste. That's fine though.
Well, no, this client generally has wonderful taste. It's not the client's fault that the book was poorly written. That's for sure.
He doesn't know it yet because he hasn't read it.
That's it. That's
Or
it.
she.
For
Not saying.
reference, if anybody hasn't heard of PAL Reading Services, it's a service where people who are blind and low vision can submit books that haven't already had an audiobook created for them, read by volunteer readers, and then submitted back to them within 2 weeks to a month, maybe a month and a
Well,
half.
it really
Mm.
depends on how
Mm,
much,
mm,
what the traffic has been like, what the book
mm,
is like, and whether there is a qualified volunteer. I mean, some books can
mm.
only be read by certain volunteers for language reasons or complicated other reasons. So, we don't give a guarantee how quickly the book will be returned, but we do it as quickly as we are able to do so.
Mhm.
Who wants to do a rapid fire review?
We
Oh,
do.
yes.
Okay, to remind everybody of the rules, Danielle McLaughlin sent us 5 of her most recent notable reads. We're going to go through them one by one. Danielle, you have 15 seconds for
Ah.
each book to give a review slash synopsis slash your general thoughts on this thing. So you need to be very succinct with your words, economize them as best as you can. We're going to read the title and the author. You're just going to hear a ticking sound effect. When you hear that sound effect, you can start. When you hear the bell at the end, you can finish your thought. But that's the end of that. We're going to go through all 5. Once we go through all 5, you can choose one of them to further elaborate on, give a more in-depth review. That makes sense for everyone?
Sounds great.
Mhm.
And I
How good
won't
is your
do
mental timer, Danielle?
Well, I won't do plot summaries because they take too long,
No,
and,
No, don't
yeah,
even
we
try.
discourage that.
yeah. Thank you.
All right, Rams, you want to read the first one?
All right. All the best, Danielle. The first book is Study for Obedience by Sarah Bernstein.
This book is fascinating. I'm not sure whether I liked it or not. I would highly recommend it, even though I'm not sure whether I liked it. It's not long. It is the story of a woman who's in a very peculiar situation. Oh my goodness, that's very
Oh,
fast.
want
Yes.
to tell us the peculiar situation?
Can I? Yes.
Yeah?
She's She is taking care of her brother in an unnamed city, and, it has very strong Holocaust implications. That's all I'm gonna say.
Okay.
And it was also a book listed for the 2023 Booker Prize and available
Yes,
Yeah.
in Sila in human voice narration. So that
that's
means,
right.
Daniel, you won't need to read it at PAL.
That's
Let's move
right.
on to let's move on to the second one, Pachinko by Minjin Lee.
Pachinko is a novel about, Korean people living in Japan, and it is, in my view, very lazy. She needed editing, it goes on terribly long, and I started to like it at the beginning, and I really didn't like it at the end.
At
No
the
need to
end.
expand.
Fair enough.
Okay. It's good that we have some context on what you think is a good book and a bad book because now it's like no further explanations needed.
Okay.
All right, let's move to the third one. This one is entitled James, and it is by Percival Everett.
James is a take on Huckleberry Finn's character Jim, who was a slave. It's a one-trick pony book. Basically, it's clever. He writes well, but in my view, it should not have been listed.
Oh,
Interesting, because this one's had
huh.
such good reviews.
Yep.
Yeah, shortlisted for Booker Prize 2024
Mhm.
release.
Yeah.
It is available in human narration on Sela as well.
Yes.
But
Book
you are a hard pass.
Yeah, I do not
number
recommend it. No.
Okay.
4 is Pilgrim at Tinker Creek by Annie Dillard.
This book is nonfiction, and it is the observations made over the course of a year by the author around her home near Tinker Creek in Virginia. And it is beautiful and intense and not an easy read. I strongly recommend this book.
Not an easy read. Was it long also?
It's not terribly long, but it's very dense and it's
Mhm.
Mm.
intense. Yeah.
Okay. Was it
Dense
your
And
and
first
also,
intense.
book written read by this author?
yes, actually, and I haven't read
Okay.
any of her other work. Yeah.
Hmm. All right. What were you gonna say, Jacob?
Dense and intense. That's how I like my
Dense.
cakes.
Yeah.
It was released in 1974. So.
Yes. Yeah, and it's human narrated, available on Sela.
Mhm. Okay, last one for the formal part of rapid fire review. This is your fifth title, recent read. It's called Milkman, and it's by Anna Burns.
This is by an Irish author. It takes place in an unnamed city, most likely Belfast, and it's brilliant. This book, it really is an close look at what the Troubles mean for a particular family and a particular young woman, and how endangered she was.
By the
Oh.
Troubles, you mean the Irish Civil War?
I do.
Mm.
Well, the and the
Mm.
ongoing, political situation in Northern Ireland.
The
Mm.
Troubles seems like such an understated way to
Yeah,
describe a war. The
it's kind of
Troubles.
clever, isn't it?
A little bit.
People talk about living through the Troubles, and they know what they mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting though because does it add to the aspect of war not being in the foreground as much as, the family dynamics and
Very
the
much.
inner
Yeah, that's a
working?
really good take, actually. Have you read this book
Mm-mm.
yourself?
But I have read other books that have a
Yeah.
similar
Mhm.
bigger picture and objectively, this is tragedy all around, but it's about the family
Yes, and
or
the
about
and the
the
wonderful thing is even though these terrible things are happening, this book is quite funny. So,
Oh,
yeah,
that is intriguing.
yeah, and also, this one, as far as I know, on Sela is only available in synthetic, voice.
Right, and it was released in 2018, so it's been out
Yeah,
for a while.
yeah.
Okay, Jacob, your choice. Do we give her a bonus or do we let her elaborate on one of the above?
No, I'm a stickler for the rules. You get 5 books. You
That's
pick one of the
all?
5.
That's
You
all.
pick one of the 5 and you elaborate on them.
All right, Danielle, which
Maybe
one
if
is
we
it?
have time, we can
Oh,
Okay,
get to
do
wow.
your other secret selections.
okay, 'cause I kept adding to the list after you asked me for a list, and I've got quite a few others. But do you have any particular one you would choose for me to speak more to,
You know what?
or
I'd love to hear more about James.
Me too.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Totally.
you know what? I was surprised by my own reaction because it had received such positive reviews. But he takes this character Jim, this who was the slave in Huckleberry Finn. And by the way, I noticed you started with a Mark Twain quote. Mark Twain is a brilliant writer, and people aren't reading Huckleberry Finn as much as they once did because, of course, it involves slavery
Mhm.
Mhm.
and the N word features quite a lot. In fact, I couldn't even read that book aloud to my grandchildren because they couldn't get over the fact that that word kept showing up. But
Mhm.
in James, he takes this character who is a very sympathetic character, and quite arguably, Huckleberry Finn is an anti slavery book in itself. And he turns him into a man who secretly knows how to read, who does a lot of code switching, and who is in flight trying to escape from slavery. But the trick keeps happening again and again. You don't really know that I know how to read, or I am really a noble person, and you're treating me like with the indignities that slaves were treated with. I think that most of us who read know something about how horrific slavery was, and this kind of beats you over the head with it. It has a few humorous moments. Huckleberry Finn has a whole lot of humorous moments,
Mm.
as well as tragic ones. But I think the feeling I got was that Everett is just beating a dead horse. He's got this clever thing. And am I allowed to give a spoiler? Can I
Okay, yeah,
do that, or
spoiler
would you
alert.
Yeah,
rather
go for
not?
it.
Okay,
Mhm.
spoiler alert. James turns out to be Huck's real father, his biological father, rather than the father who is so hideous and violent and dies in Huckleberry Finn. Um, you kind of see it coming. He signals it again and again. Why is James so interested in Huck? Why does he care for him so much?
Oh,
And it's kind of like, all right, got it. You know,
figured it
and
out. Yeah.
yeah, but, within the first half a dozen pages. So I just thought it was too clever by half and lazy. He could have done so much more with this topic. Or he could have said, why don't you guys just go read Huckleberry Finn? Because Twain's a better writer than I am. So
Snap.
anyway,
And
yeah.
you talked earlier about authors not taking themselves too seriously, but it's in contrast to what you're saying when you're reviewing this book, which is it could have been taken much more seriously, or the serious parts weren't done enough justice, if you will.
Well, yeah, I mean, he belabors the horrors of slavery. It's um it kind of reminds me of an old story about a farmer who is found beating his donkey over the head with a 2 by 4, and somebody goes by and he says, what are you doing to that animal? I mean, that's terrible. And the farmer says, I'm just trying to get his attention. That's kind of how I felt,
Analogy.
with this book. Okay, you've got my attention. I got the information. Now, where are we going? It was, yeah,
So
it,
you're
it
the donkey in this analogy.
kind of, yes. With anger in general, in my view. You know, anyway, that
Okay.
is my take. I
But how
appreciate
about the
that.
humor part? You also
Um,
mentioned that it's not humorous enough.
It isn't humorous enough. There are characters like the king and the duke who appear in Huckleberry Finn who are ludicrous characters, and they're very funny. Um, Not so much. He also he takes the journey that James and Huck are on, and he just reiterates the near drowning, the boats, always finding a boat at the most optimal situation. That could have been very funny too, the fact that,
Mm,
"Oh, look, there's another boat." You know, but, it was just like, "Oh my god, this is fantastic," it's just like, I'm
yeah.
I'm over it, thank you. Um, so it had some moments and, the very fact that they're always escaping is kind of humorous, but the situations where James offers himself up to his white seeming friend and says, "You sell me as a slave, and then we'll split the money." That situation is
Whoa.
is quite, yeah. I mean, it's humorous. It's terrible, but it's also
Mhm.
humorous. He didn't play with it enough in my view. But again, I'm not a partisan, so
This is one of those books where it feels the idea of it attracted a lot of attention on its own,
Right.
where you change the
Yes.
perspective
Mhm.
that a story is told from a classic beloved novel by Mark
Yeah.
Mhm.
Twain, and just the synopsis itself will have gotten it a lot of points.
Well, yeah, and I think that it's also, and you'll please forgive me for this, I think it has taken people who are so afraid of being labeled as racist or seeming to be racist because they loved Huckleberry Finn and given them an easy out.
It's a pass,
And
yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. And not so good.
Well, I mean, maybe when you take on something like this, it could be done more tastefully. It could be done to further open up our minds about a topic as big as slavery, or take a classic like Huckleberry Finn and do something with it.
Mhm.
But t- according to your review, I feel like it's not necessarily done tastefully.
Well, I just don't see why he had to, reiterate this code switching thing. It's clever the first time you read it, and by about the 10th, you're thinking, "All right, I got it."
What was the intention, do you think? I always wonder about, like, nowadays we get a lot of the recreations, the remixes, the anti-hero plots, right? Like, you get
Mhm.
the reiterations of things that already exist, which is fair. It's like, not as surface level as, but you could compare it to just covering something, right? Like releasing a
You
new cover
could.
of an album.
I'm a little more negative, I'm sorry to say. I see this as a kind of attempt at creating the noble savage, the enslaved person who really has agency, because
Mhm.
we're so uncomfortable with the facts of the situation. And that's
Okay.
why I think it's kind of
It's
an
that
easy
scapegoating thing you
out.
meant. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's nice to think that the man who was enslaved was secretly able to do all of these wonderful things, but in reality, slavery was such a horrifying situation that
Mhm.
people really did not have the kind of agency that he creates for James in this story.
Did you find it far fetched? Is that one of the reasons you have a gripe with this book?
Hmm. Um, yeah, it is far-fetched. I mean, the notion of his being, the father of Huckleberry Finn is, it's far-fetched, and
Mhm.
it's also unnecessary. You can have a huge fondness for somebody else's child, and you can be really concerned about the welfare of somebody else's child. The child does not have to be yours for you to be that concerned about them, in my view. And if that's he throws that in as a sort of an explication of the
Yep.
situation. Nah.
What happens to people who read this who haven't read Huckleberry Finn, you think?
Um, that's a very good question, Ramya. I don't I My hope would be that they would be drawn to read Huckleberry Finn. My belief is they won't, because this one is very short. Huckleberry Finn's quite a bit longer. This one is an easy read, and Huckleberry Finn, for people living in the 21st century, it's early 20th century literature, which isn't
Yep.
always that
Mm.
easy for contemporary people to read. So, will they have a go at it? Kind of hope so, but in reality, I'm not so sure.
Hmm. Yeah, I think about just the atmosphere and environment we live in now too. And as you said, like this gives a lot of people a pass, in
Yeah.
your opinion, when you read this book. And that was under the assumption that we've read Huckleberry Finn. But for those people picking this up with all the social commentary around this book and the release of it to begin
Right.
with, I'm
Mm.
curious about
Yeah, I'd
where
love
we land.
to find that out, because when I went to high school over 2,000 years ago, Huckleberry Finn was a required reading.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've noticed that in schools they tend to choose more modern books nowadays for exactly
Mhm.
that reason because older books
Mhm.
are like significantly harder to read than what's coming out nowadays.
Well, and also they're being politically correct. Let's
Yep.
let's let's
Yep.
face it,
That's
For
some
sure.
true.
some books are highly problematic. That doesn't mean they're bad books, but it sure means that teachers better teach, and that they had better, understand the circumstances under which a book was written, so that they can talk with their students about, why is this the case?
Mhm.
What are we really looking at here? But if you look at policies where people are not going to be allowed to teach about slavery or
Exactly.
racism.
Yeah,
Good
we're
luck.
canceling so much
Yeah.
out of the conversation already.
Danielle, I'm sorry we couldn't get to your bonus books. You came here
You outright refused her.
over prepared. Well, yep, I gotta lay down the hammer. But we will get
Jacob.
more chances to talk about everything you want to talk about because I know you're just an absolute fountain of knowledge when it comes to this. We're so happy to have you on. This is a great conversation.
Mhm.
This was
Thank you for
so
doing
much
RFI.
fun. Thank you both so very much.
Of
Thank
course.
you.
That was our brand new regular contributor, Danielle McLaughlin. That's all the time we have for this edition of AMI Audiobook Review. We'll make sure to include all of Danielle's rapid fire review selections in the podcast description on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find a repeat of AMI Audiobook Review as part of AMI Today on AMI Audio every 6 hours. The show is also available on your favorite podcast platforms, including YouTube. Thanks for joining us. I was your host, Jacob Szymanski with Ramya Amuthan. Have a good one.